When was the last time you stopped trying to control life and simply experienced it? I was spending some time with my friends over the past weekend, and one of them asked me, after all of this self-improvement, this reflection, what have you understood about happiness and the meaning of life? And I don't think that's a question anyone can fully answer. I don't think you suddenly arrive at a final understanding having spent a few years changing your habits and becoming more disciplined. But if there's something that I've come closer to lately, is the idea that life starts feeling lighter the minute you stop taking it so seriously. And I know that comes from someone who spent years trying to structure and control his life. Because for a long time I believed meaning came from control. Having tight routines, always trying to optimize them, always trying to move towards something. And that obviously led to my life becoming more structured around improvement. And while that discipline absolutely changed me for the better, I started to realize that the more tightly I tried to organize life, the less room there was to actually live it. Alan Watts talks about this a lot. He describes life almost like a cosmic play, a great performance where every person becomes so absorbed in their role that they forget they're acting. We become so consumed by achievement, failure, status. It's almost like we're walking around with this invisible pressure that everything matters so much. That every decision is permanent, or that there's some invisible scoreboard that's keeping a tab on whether we're living life correctly. But if you were to zoom out, it becomes difficult not to realize how temporary all of this is. Galaxies have lasted long before us, and they're going to exist long after us. And somehow in the middle of all of that, we've convinced ourselves that replying to one email late or falling behind on one goal is the end of the world. And that especially hit me hard because I'm someone who's always tried to control everything. Right from my routines to my future to my outcomes, even my emotions. But I've realized that life doesn't care about control. The tighter you try to grip it, the heavier it becomes. Alan Watts had another great metaphor that I really liked. He said, trying to fully control life is like trying to smooth out water with your hands. The harder you try to force it, the more disturbed it becomes. And I think that's exactly what happens when you try to become overly serious about everything. The moment you divide life into success and failure, productive and wasted, you create that tension. You create that constant voice in your head that keeps telling you that you should be doing more. You should be becoming more. And because of that voice, you stop hearing life itself, You stop noticing the ordinary beauty in the basic things because you're too busy trying to optimize every aspect of life. And strangely enough, the moments that I've felt the most meaningful lately have been the simplest ones. Like going for a walk without my phone, laughing with friends, talking to family, making something nice to eat. Moments where nothing extraordinary happened, but I was actually there to experience it, fully there. And that's probably been the biggest shift for me. I still care about my goals. I still wake up with ambition. I still think discipline matters deeply. But I don't worship the outcomes the same way anymore. I don't punish myself for slowing down, or I don't treat every setback as proof that I'm failing at life. Because life was never supposed to be a performance that you exhaust yourself trying to perfect. It's meant to be experienced. And maybe that's why Alan Watts said, the meaning of life is to just be alive. Not once you've figured everything out or you've become successful enough to deserve the peace, but right now, in the middle of all of the uncertainty. I guess I'm finally starting to understand it, so let me leave you with this one question. What if happiness isn't hidden inside of achievement, but rather inside of finally understanding how to stop taking life so seriously? Think about it. And thank you for listening. I'll see you guys next week.